Civilian Oversight Authority will be hosting its Transforming Our Police Service TOPS program on Thursday, December 18, 2025. The TOPS program, established in 2019, aims at ensuring that police officers adhere to Jamaica Constabulary Force policies. Additionally, the program looks at boosting their confidence, morale, and spirits. The program is comprised of 4 phases: the TOPS Area Competition, the TOPS Area Award Ceremony, Area Command Performance, and Area Command Reinspection. All phases that foster professionalism and accountability. Join Cliff Hughes online from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. as we broadcast live from the TOPS program on Thursday, December 18, 2025. Only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by Police Civilian Oversight Authority.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice.
Welcome to Let's Talk Justice. It is Monday, December 15th. My name is Jade Williams. I'm the Policy Research and Advocacy Manager at Jamaicans for Justice. I was expecting our Executive Director to be joining us online, but I don't think she's on. Okay, so she'll be joining us shortly. Michael Jackson, our Executive Director, she's unable to be with us in studio today, but she will be with us remotely soon. So thank you again for joining us. Today's episode, we are speaking to reforming the circuit court, but I'm sure Mikkel will have some week that was to discuss. So while we wait on her to join, I will go firstly into our right of the week for this week. Our right of the week for this week comes from the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, Section 14.3, and it speaks to your right to trial in a reasonable time. So any person that is in conflict with the law has the right to be heard within a reasonable time. The person must be brought promptly before a court or any other lawful authority, and that person should then be released either unconditionally or be released on condition to ensure that they will appear at trial. Now, if the person is not released, they must be brought back to court as soon as reasonably possible for the court to make the appropriate orders with the appropriate conditions. So this is 2 rights in one. It is your right to trial within a reasonable time, but it also speaks to your right to bail, right? We also have a trivia question for this week. Our trivia question for this week is, which piece of legislation contains the provisions that govern the circuit courts? As I said, we will be talking about the circuit court today. So which piece of legislation governs the circuit court? So you can respond to that question by sending a message in the chat on YouTube. You can send a WhatsApp message to 2397583, or you can respond to us on Instagram at JA4Justice. All right, do we have Mikkel with us as yet? Okay.
Good afternoon and happy Monday to our listeners.
All right, Mikkel, I was just saying to the listeners that you may have some week that was. Are we going to do that now, or are we going to wait till the end of the show? Closer to the end of the show.
Okay, so forgive me, listeners, those who are on YouTube and Radio Land, not in tip-top shape today. The flu, but anyway, life goes on. All right, so last week we celebrated International Human Rights Day, and we were down by St. William Grant Park, and it was a good day. And one of the things we will be talking about towards the end of the program is just public education and the importance thereof with understanding human rights, because we saw a lot of young people, babies, I call anyone under 15 years old, coming out and just being so engaged around their sexual and reproductive health rights, broad human rights. And I just wanted to mention that because it's important that we understand what our fundamental rights and freedoms are, because without that understanding and appreciation, sometimes we are the first as people to say, let's change some laws so that the government can fight crime, so that we can deal with issues again of misinformation and disinformation without perhaps taking a step back on what the broad implications are. So we will touch on that towards the end. But the second important thing I just want to briefly touch on, which I noted in my remarks on behalf of the organization, is that Jamaica is celebrating 43% reduction in murder. And we saw the communication coming from Dr. Kevin Blake, the police commissioner, and JFJ certainly joins in that celebration. But one of the things I cautioned in that remarks is that while we celebrate as a human rights organization, we do have concerns on a separate issue, which is the escalating numbers of fatalities by the state. Far too many people are being killed by the state without there being the type of timely updates, matters being brought before the courts, the underutilization of body cameras. And I do take note that the cabinet has just approved an additional 1,000 body cameras. That's a very good update, but it would be good to get the update from the police commissioner on the status of the procurement of the 1,000 that was being procured before. Last I heard from the police commissioner several weeks ago was that we do expect those body cams to be in the island in another 4 weeks. That was several weeks ago, and that 4 weeks deadline would have expired. So it's something that we just need to follow up on. We support the police, all of us as Jamaicans, law-abiding citizens, but we must also be vigilant about that escalating number of citizens being killed at the hands of the state and ensuring that there's transparency in those figures. All right, so over to you, Jade.
Thanks so much for that, Mikhail. So as I said earlier, we are doing the topic this week, reforming the circuit court system. We did hear our right of the week already. So concerns regarding a court matter extending for 13 years have raised questions about the circuit court system. This case, involving 7 men charged with serious offences in Manchester, has been repeatedly adjourned and delayed, largely due to administrative challenges, limited courtroom availability, and a backlog of cases. Justice Minister Delroy Chuck noted the unusual length of time the matter has remained unresolved, and said it may need to be transferred to another jurisdiction if progress cannot be made. And this was a solution previously employed in the matter of Mario Dean, and the case against the 3 police officers in that matter. Now, Attorney at Law John Clark has highlighted the need for circuit court reform. Mr. Clark pointed to the systemic delays and procedural inefficiencies as key issues, and said reform is needed to ensure cases are handled more efficiently and that the justice system functions in a timely and fair manner. So to discuss these issues, we are joined by Anne-Marie Furtado Richards, who is an attorney at law and is the chairperson of the Criminal Practice Committee of the Jamaica Bar Association. Mrs. Richards, are you with us?
I am. I'm actually on your platform. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, I'm seeing you and hearing you clearly now. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we wanted to kind of kick off the discussion, understanding some of the challenges that maybe you would have seen in the circuit court that might be affecting the timely adjudication of matters. So what are those challenges?
All right, if I might, I like to do a little history before I go to the matter. So if you could give me a little bit of time so that your listeners will understand what it means, how it operates, and therefore what are the real challenges that the courts are going to experience. Am I permitted to do that?
Please do.
And I'll do that quickly. All right, so first of all, the history of this court, the circuit court, is rooted in English common law. And the courts were modeled on the English assize, where judges travel to different parishes to hear the case, right? So this system of itinerant judges laid the foundation of what has become our circuit court system. And it is designed to ensure island-wide access to justice. So the purpose of it was to bring justice closer to the rural parishes and reduce the need for litigants to travel to Kingston, right? And because of that, you're going to understand that there are 3 terms there are 3 terms in the year for the court. We have the Michaelmas term, which is September 15th to December 19th. Then we have the Hillary term, which is January 7th to around April 15th. And we have the final term, which is around Easter term, which is April 16th to July 31. So of our 14 parishes, right, we only have 3 parishes that we say have continuous circuit. And a continuous circuit means it is for that entire term. The 3 circuits are Kingston and St. Andrew, Kingston and St. Andrew being considered to be the home circuit. Then you have St. Catherine and you have Clarendon Circuit Court. Now, those 3 are the only courts that sit continuous. So in other words, when I tell you about the circuit starts from September 15th to December 19th, those 3 courts are the only courts that sit straight from September 15th to December 19th. Will therefore mean that the other parishes, right, which are the other 12 parishes, they do not sit on a continuous basis. And generally speaking, they only sit for 4 weeks out of each term. No. What has happened to as well, another history. The circuit court started as a result out of the preliminary inquiries proceedings. Now we have something called committal proceedings. So what is preliminary inquiries? That is where the serious matters that a parish court judge does not have jurisdiction to do, only the circuit court has jurisdiction to do. And what happened were that you would have the witnesses coming to court to give live evidence, the court listening to the evidence, see if it is that the ingredients of the offenses have been made out, or as we would say in law, a prima facie case has been made out, and then committed to circuit. That no longer prevails. So of course, you know that would take time because that would be another trial before you have the real trial in the circuit court. But it is that the circuit court would be given a little reprieve to be able to then have those matters transition from the parish court to the circuit court. However, so in other words, it was a filtering system. What we now have is a committal proceedings where automatically the judge looks at the evidence, not calling the witnesses, so they just read the statement to see if it is out, those same ingredients are made out, and then they commit it. So obviously, it is going to be a quicker process for a matter to be dealt with in the parish court to go to the circuit court. What is going to happen? Because there is no filtration system as what existed before, you're going to have larger volumes of matters heading straight into the circuit court. And if it is at the numbers, as in the same court numbers, the same court judges, numbers of judges, the same amount of prosecutors, you're not, the system itself, the infrastructure, is not sufficient to handle those volumes. And you're going to have significant delays. So for example, you had parishes in the past like Hanover, Trelawney, Portland. Historically, their caseloads were low. Now you're looking at, for one circuit, and we're not talking about matters that are even before the circuit and have not yet been tried. You have at least 100+ matters being pushed to them each term. We understand, I hope that we can understand, therefore, that, and those circuits are going to be sitting for 4 weeks per term, right? You're going to have challenges. So I can now segue into what are the problems. So the first problem we say is that you're going to have human resource constraints because you have what? You have insufficient numbers of judges, insufficient numbers of prosecutors. Then you're going to have, where I'm going to even be real with you and your listeners and say you're going to have interconnected legal practice. So for example, someone who is practicing down that side, for example, down the Manchester side, they might not only be doing Manchester, but they might be doing St. Elizabeth, or Westmoreland. So you might have that as well, where attorneys are doing several practices. And so it is that you're going to have issues of scheduling and case management.
Yes.
If it is that the system is improved, perhaps that will also be easily dealt with, because we do have attorneys, defense attorneys in practice. Then we talk about inadequate infrastructure, because again, unlike Clarendon, St. Catherine, and obviously Home Circuit, where those courts are there just for the circuit court, the other parishes are going to use one of their current courts to house the circuit court. So what does that mean? A parish court sitting is going to be affected when the circuit court comes, because they will have to now double up, because there is not enough space for the circuit court plus the parish court.
Mrs.
So
Richards, I'm going to ask you to just hold right there. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll pick up on the conversation when we come back.
Okay.
Do it for your best life, do it. Go check your HIV status, do it. So keep your life trending, no pretending. Me I tell yourself it, do it for you, do it for you. Every time you are link with a condom, coulda husband, coulda wife, coulda be a random. Condom connect and protect your profile. Be your own fan, do it for your best life, do it for your best life, do it. Don't put yourself at risk. Condom connect every time, do it for your best life.
Tune in to Nationwide 90 FM with Pepita and Honeybee from 3 to 5 p.m. as we broadcast live from Megamart Waterloo, Saturday, December 20. Pepita and Honeybee plus Megamart equals a festive customer appreciation celebration. Join us at Megamart Waterloo for the customer appreciation festivities, samplings, entertainment, and more. Pepita and Honeybee are doing it mega with Megamart. Come be part of the mega broadcast with Pepita and Honeybee, Saturday, December 20, 2025 at Megamart Waterloo from 3 to 5 p.m. only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We've been discussing reforming the circuit court system. I am joined by Anne-Marie Furtado Richards, who is an attorney at law and the chairperson of the Criminal Practice Committee of the Jamaica Bar Association. Before the break, Mrs. Richards, you were giving us some idea of the challenges that the circuit court might face, and you mentioned human resource constraints, the fact of interconnected legal practice, as well as inadequate infrastructure. I was wondering if you could just go back to that inadequate infrastructure point for me.
All right, so what I'm saying is that the infrastructure that exists, so you don't have, unlike the three other courts that I told you about, Clarendon, St. Catherine, and Home Circuit, the other parishes, they don't have a court solely designated for the circuit court. So what prevails is that they will have to use the existing parish courts in order to have the circuit court. So what that is going to really mean is that the parish court is going to have to give up one of their courts in order to facilitate the parish court. All right? So for example, in Manchester Circuit Court, you would use, before it is that they are now moved to the plaza. So they've moved to the plaza because, the court it's not operational. So they've moved to a plaza, and at the plaza, there is a courtroom that would perhaps be otherwise utilized, but they've used it for the circuit court.
Yes.
So you have other parishes, for example, given an example of St. Anne's Bay, when the circuit court sits in St. Anne's Bay, which is near to the municipal, another court that might have been utilized will not be utilized, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just if you could also, just for the listeners, my apologies, just indicate very briefly what are some of the matters that a parish court will hear versus the circuit court, so they can fulsomely appreciate the discussion and the implications of that doubling.
All right, parish court is governed by the Parish Court Judicature Act, right? The Judicature Parish Court Act, Section 268, governs the jurisdiction of the court for the parish, right? So in other words, a parish court judge will say they are creatures of statute. Apart from some matters that are common law, they can only do matters according to Section 268. So the more serious offenses, they do not have the jurisdiction to hear, and it's only as it can only be dealt with in the circuit court. Now we're talking about indictable offenses. So we're talking about offenses such as murder. We're talking about serious sexual offenses matters, rape, grievous sexual assault, buggery, those kinds of sexual grooming. We talk about serious matters like burglary, and so on. So the legislation will tell you which jurisdiction you can hear and which jurisdiction the parish court can hear. If it's a matter that the parish court cannot hear, then the matter has to be sent to the circuit court, where it will either be heard before judge and jury, or it will be heard strictly before a judge alone, right? Now, because of that, and because of limited spaces, the reality is that the parish court, when they host the circuit court, right, they will have to perhaps double up in order to complete their list. So it is not a situation, apart from the 3 courts that I have said to you, I'm not aware of any other courts having a standalone circuit court or a circuit court room designated for the circuit court. So we talk about there being inadequate infrastructure. Now we talk about delays in case disposal. Appreciate, for example, when I was a Crown Counsel, I was a deputy director, I don't remember, several years ago, right? And my last stint as at the DPP's office was Manchester Circuit. At that time, when I got my list, I got 100 cases to be dealt with in 3 weeks, right? And we're going to have to segue that as well with issues of jury. If it is that we don't have enough jurors to empanel, that's going to be a story and an issue by itself. But let us talk about the reality. You have 100 cases, and let us say, as a case as Mr. Clark had indicated about the length of it. The reality is that you are going to have complex cases that 3 weeks will not be sufficient to complete, or you might have multiple accused that because of the volume of because of the amount of accused that persons you have, certainly 3 weeks or 4 weeks is not going to be sufficient. And therefore you're either going to have to extend it, or preparations are going to be made to have that particular case tried. Now, this is my view, and that is therefore not a Jamaica Bar Association view, or it's certainly not a view that I'm seeing anyone else shared, but this is my observation, which is that the reality is that I don't know which court is going, unless special arrangements are going to be made, to do one case when you have 100 to do. And the aim is that you're going to try to dispose of as many cases that you can within that whether it's 3 weeks you have as a stint or 4 weeks that exists now. You're trying to really get off as much cases as possible off your list. The reality too as well is that not every case can be transferred to Clarendon or to St. Catherine or to Kingston for you to deal with it. So again, if matters are being taken a long time to do, as you had said in your introduction, arrangements will have to be made. Because it is, when you talk about transfer of a case to a different jurisdiction, you have to look at the pendulum swings both ways. You look about accused persons and his time, the length that he's going to be in custody for, but you also have to look about what is going to happen with the witnesses to come and give evidence. Sometimes you find witnesses, just like everybody, it might be challenging financially to come to court. So can you imagine you are now asked not to go to Manchester, for example, or Montego Bay, and asked to come to Kingston, or asked to come to St. Catherine or Clarendon because it is that you're changing venue. So all of those things you have to, there's not just something lightly that has to be taken into consideration. These are serious consideration. Now, as I said, you have jury-related challenges. So you have people not willing to come and give evidence or to come and participate in the justice system. Whether I'm a crown counsel or whether I am defense counsel, you have to commend persons for giving of themselves to be a part of the justice system. So I always say, everybody talk about justice and everybody talk about we want justice and they have the placard. But what does that mean, right?
Yes.
It means that we have to give of ourselves to have the system, the wheels to turn, because each of us play a part in that cycle. So sometimes they don't have enough people. I was told when I was trying to check around that in one circuit you only had 11 jurors. Now, if people are going to challenge, just simply doing maths, and if you have challenges and you have, let's say you have 5 challenges each, that is 10, and you have 7 on the person, you know that you need to have at least 17 jurors. If you have 11 jurors, you cannot start. Because what it would mean is that they would probably have to do something that I've never really seen it in my life, but I know it has been done, where you scrape up people off the street to come and sit as jurors, right? So you have all of these different things, plus the typical issues in a trial. Somebody making an application, whether the prosecution or defense making an application, which is going to take some time, right? You have the prisoners, they're coming late, so court starts late, right? You have documentation that are required, social inquiry reports, any sort of document, psychiatric evaluation reports, and those take time. So of course they contribute to the delay. So possible solutions, because I know I'm looking at the time. Consideration has to be given for continuous circuits, but all of that costs money, right? So I am too small. I'm not even on the ladder, but discussions will have to be made. So it's good that we're having these discussions. You're going to look again. I think in every aspect that we talk about the justice system, there at some point we talk about the infrastructure and the facilities. Again, we speak about we need to perhaps look at increasing the numbers of judges and the prosecutions. And we need to look about the jury selection and the management system. We need to reform and strengthen. And a lot of this, it's about education. So what JFJ is doing, I commend you. We need a lot of town hall meetings. We need a lot of information. We need to have our children learning civics going into the high school as well, so that they can understand what it is to be a Jamaican, what it is to be a Jamaican citizen. Because the reality is that what we experience at times, persons have reasonable reasons for not wanting to serve, but then again, you have sometimes where they don't want the discomfort to be sitting in a trial where they're really not going to get much money for doing it, right? For doing it, and for some persons, based on their jobs, it might be a challenge, right? But unless it is, I would say, there is anything else that you wish to ask of me, I believe that is the extent as which I can go at this point in time.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Richards. You really gave us an extensive perspective there as to how the circuit court operates and some of the issues that might come up in its operation. I just wanted one other question, which was if there are other jurisdictions that have this. I know you mentioned the UK, but outside of the UK, maybe in the Caribbean, that similarly practice circuit court in the way that we do, and if you are aware of them seeing any similar challenges to what we're seeing here.
At this time, I cannot say. I mean, if you had asked me before, I would have done a little research on that. But the difference is that, remember, in some of our islands, they're smaller than our jurisdiction.
Well, yes.
And the size that we have in Jamaica, some of those jurisdictions don't have that kind of size to contend with. And the reality is that as well, our numbers are really high. I could always do the research and let you know and pass it on to you so that you can advise your listeners. But that is one of the things that is unique about Jamaica in comparison to our counterparts.
All right. I don't know if Mikkel had another question for you before we take your final word.
No, well, I think Mrs. Richards touched on it when she mentioned the call for the continuous circuits, by noting that you just need, along with the infrastructure, increased judges and prosecutors. So unless there's anything to clarify to that, I'm good.
All right. So I would like to thank you very much, Mrs. Richards, for joining us on the show today. I don't know if you have a final word on the circuit court or on justice reform generally.
No, just continue fighting the fight, continue advocating. I am hoping that, I know that it's always scarce resources fighting for the different things, and especially in light of our recent mishap with Melissa. So my condolences to those especially from the West, those who are suffering. I mean, I know persons who have had challenges. So our prayers are out to you and our condolences are out to you. And we're asking, I mean, for example, Black River, when I saw how the courthouse has been demolished, yes, and therefore those persons who are in the legal system, our thoughts and prayers are with you. And for those who do the contribution will continue as best as possible. But as I said, we know we have limited resources. I'm not a technocrat, and I'm certainly not anyone of significance who can say to the government, put some money, but wherever funding can be found, and again, that is only through advocacy, we would ask that the fundings be placed in our infrastructure, in our human resource.
Thank you so much. That was Anne-Marie Furtado Richards. She is an attorney at law and the chairperson of the Criminal Practice Committee of the Jamaica Bar Association. We take the break.
All right. I can exit the platform now?
Yes.
All right.
The Police Civilian Oversight Authority will be hosting its Transforming Our Police Service TOPS program on Thursday, December 18, 2025. The TOPS program, established in 2019, aims at ensuring that police officers adhere to Jamaica Constabulary Force policies. Additionally, the program looks at boosting their confidence, morale, and spirits. The program is comprised of 4 phases: the TOPS Area Competition, the TOPS Area Award Ceremony, Area Command Performance, and Area Command Reinspection. All phases that foster professionalism and accountability. Join Cliff Hughes online from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. as we broadcast live from the TOPS program on Thursday, December 18, 2025. Only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by Police Civilian Oversight Authority.
Tune in to Nationwide 90 FM with Pepita and Honeybee from 3 to 5 p.m. as we broadcast live from Megamart Waterloo, Saturday, December 20. Pepita and Honeybee plus Megamart equals a festive customer appreciation celebration. Join us at Megamart Waterloo for the customer appreciation festivities, samplings, entertainment, and more. Pepita and Honeybee are doing it mega with Megamart. Come be part of the mega broadcast with Pepita and Honeybee, Saturday, December 20, 2025 at Megamart Waterloo from 3 to 5 p.m. only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media.
Public opinion.
Stop this foolish about this GLP and PMP business. We are a Jamaican.
Different people.
It's not a matter of a GLP or a PMP. I think it's more like where it is that you think you're comfortable, what support you can afford to make the country better.
Different views.
Most entertainers, they're not amenable to management, so the only thing that can ultimately structure them is the court and the prison.
Public opinion. The voice of the people at 6:25 p.m. weekdays during Nationwide at 5. Tune into Nationwide at 6:25 p.m. for Public Opinion, where the people's views matter.
Public Opinion is brought to you by Cleasing Industrial Supplies Limited, Industrial Automation and Control Solutions.
On Wednesday, December 17, tune in to Nationwide 90 FM from 1 to 3 p.m. when LASCO, in partnership with the Jamaica Constabulary Force, proudly announces the Super 6 finalists for the 2025 Saluting Our Heroes Police of the Year Awards. Meet the Super 6, Jamaica's finest: Constable Monique Bartley, Corporal Stephen Smith, Corporal Regine Holt, Detective Corporal Chadwick Williams, Constable Chantal Powell, and Detective Corporal Livy Evans. Finalists for the prestigious 2025 LASCO JCF Saluting Our Heroes Police of the Year Award. Tune in to Nationwide 90 FM as we highlight and celebrate the outstanding service, leadership, and community impact of the Super 6. Wednesday, December 17, from 1 to 3 p.m. It's the Super 6 finalists for the 2025 Saluting Our Heroes Police of the Year Awards. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by LASCO Chin Foundation and the Jamaica Constabulary Force.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We just wrapped up a discussion with Anne-Marie Furtado Richards, attorney at law and the chairperson of Criminal Practice Committee at Jambar, on reforming the circuit court. And I think we learned a lot about how the circuit court has been functioning and why we have been seeing some of the challenges that we have seen. Mikkel?
Yeah, I always enjoy having Mrs. Furtado Richards on the program. She's such a reservoir of knowledge, and just how she articulates the issues, it's very welcoming.
Yes.
And, as we were having the discussions, I think it's important to put in perspective that we have seen significant investment in justice reform. There are documents over the years, I think I've shared some with you as well, the Wolf Report, for example, yes, that was several years ago, looking at the need to, reform that reporting relationship between the clerks of the court and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. And we have seen investments in terms of increased prosecutors. I know former Madam DPP Paula Llewellyn, she has spoken with much pride, deservedly so, in terms of the number of prosecutors that have seen an increase during her leadership. So these are some marked improvement that we should note. And importantly, I believe it was last year or the year before, we saw where the salaries of our judges were increased, which is also a necessary improvement, because you have to invest in your human resources. And we have heard from Justice Minister, the Honorable Delroy Chuck, speaking to, increased investment in the infrastructure, but we do have a far way to go. And I just think it's important that we support that call. And in our 2026 advocacy, Jade, I do believe as an organization, we have to do much more advocacy in terms of justice reform in these simple but practical means, because there is no way we should have 13 years as the time period that a trial has not yet gotten underway. And we saw similar, delays in the Mario Dean matter. And, it really is an injustice to have matters languishing before the courts due to lack of sufficient space and so on. So I think we need to do some more advocacy there.
Yes, Mikkel, I have to agree with you on that point. I'm also glad that she brought back up the issue of the jury, which was also an issue that we saw with the Mario Dean matter. Just some jurisdictions, you simply don't have the bodies to come to the court and be selected for jury duty, and pointing out the fact that the more defendants you have, the more persons you will need. And particularly in this Manchester case, there are 7 defendants, so even just the amount of persons that need to be physically at the court significantly increases in that case.
And on that point, I would like us to segue a little bit in terms of the importance of public education, civic knowledge, and engagement. So if you realize, listeners, we have invested a lot here at JFJ in public education. Nationwide is very kind to us, but we do pay for this hourly program. It takes a lot of financial investments to put information on social media. And we are investing as an organization because one of the things that we find very important is to raise that awareness among the citizenry so that we understand how governance works, we understand how the justice system works, but more importantly, we understand our role in that system. We appreciate that it's not JFJ over here defending criminals as some people would want to label it. It's recognizing that injustice can happen to any one of us. Injustice, as you listen to Mrs. Furtado Richards mean, if it is that you're talking about doubling up the courtrooms and the procedures, it means that there are some offenses that can be tried in the parish courts, domestic violence matters, and so on, that would see delay because you have to prioritize public interest matters like murder and gang trials and so on in the Supreme Court. So I want us to rethink how we look at justice reform and the role of civil society in that process. And as I said, Jade, in our written remarks on Human Rights Day, civil society leaders and organizations, we must advocate fearlessly, but fairly. And with that, it means that there is an onus on us to ensure that we speak with integrity as we inform and share our perspective. It must be evidence-based as we do that. So for 2026, for us, it's just important that we do more public education, Jade, and also from the state in that respect.
Yeah, I have to agree there, Mikhail. I also, as you were talking about particularly, our civil society and NGO friends and partners, I think in making these evidence-based statements, we have to use the tools that are available to us. For the past year, we have been actively speaking to the Access to Information framework and how important that is to not just us as advocates, but to the regular citizen. And as we talk about, making evidence-based statements and doing evidence-based advocacy, even as a normal citizen that's not a part of an organization, that Access to Information Act really makes the information you need accessible, right? So far, we've produced already 2 reports. They're not quite released yet, but 2 reports that would have utilized Access to Information data. We've made public statements that have utilized Access to Information data, and it has informed points that we made in submissions to Parliament and policy recommendations as well. So it's important that you arm yourself with that knowledge that is publicly available and is available to you by statute under that Access to Information Act. And
yeah, okay. No, go ahead. Finish out your thought. I
actually saw a message in our Instagram about what rights do I have under the Data Protection Act, and that kind of question, just asking about how even private sector can interact with your rights. And we will provide that information, but I think it's also important as we're engaging with the tools that are available. JFJ has been doing a lot of public education on our social media pages and through our e-briefs, and a lot of these issues, the rights under certain pieces of legislation and the gaps are covered in some of these publications. So feel free to educate yourselves as well.
Yeah, as you were talking about the access to information, Jade, And I believe it was our conversation, forgive me, whether it was last week or the week before, and we had Attorney Cameron and MAG President on the program, and this conversation about misinformation and disinformation. Now, one of the reasons for JFJ pushing non-legislative actions in dealing with these issues, it's because beyond the implications of criminalizing fake news and so on, and I don't want to be misunderstood, that we shouldn't deal with these issues. But I firmly believe that we need an active citizenry. We need an informed citizenry. No, I saw on the Jamaica Observer and I heard local government minister talking about the misinformation and the disinformation on something like the government canceling all Christmas parties. Now, for the life of me, listeners, I wonder which Jamaican citizen could send me such nonsense in my WhatsApp and I circulate it. You know the reason I wouldn't? Because I read and watch the news cycle. I'm informed about things. I personally have utilized the ATR request outside of my JFJ capacity about issues of importance. I go on the government sites. I blocked my mother for a few minutes during Hurricane Melissa time because she was circulating nonsense to me, and I had to say to her, why are you circulating something about JPS when JPS is on WhatsApp and you could have gone in there? It's just being aware of the sources of legitimate information. And while I appreciate the good work that social media influencers sometimes do, we can't be following TikTokers as our source of information when we have the state agencies. And to the state agencies now, proactive disclosure is important. So for example, if the government is of the belief that you have political opponents and detractors talking about which parish is getting what type of contract and who is getting it, then I welcome the subsequent announcement by the Prime Minister that we're going to be putting the information on our website. That is what we mean by proactive disclosure. So we share the information so that the detractors have no opportunity to spew nonsense. So for 2026, Jade, I'm making the commitment to listeners that JFJ, we're going to be doing much more in the communities just to educate people on how to be informed. You know, youngsters, watch the news, listen to the news cycle, take up a book sometimes and read it. Use other version if you don't like reading, because not being informed, in my humble opinion, is the avenue through which misinformation thrives. So I just wanted to emphasize that, Jade, as we go through, you know, the year that was and the year that is to come.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for that again, Mikhail. You know, as you were talking about increased knowledge and increased critical thinking, I think that is what we are missing indeed. Increased critical thinking is something that we must address.
Mm-hmm. What about constitutional reform for you? How did that go for the year? I know, you know, we are quite shit about that process here at JFJ. How did that go for you, and what are you looking forward to once we close out the best season of the year, which is Christmas?
Well, I think the election kind of slowed the roll of the constitutional train, because at the point that we were at earlier in the year, we had seen a bill last year and we were expecting to be called to the Joint Select Committee at any moment early this year. Unfortunately, you know, that Joint Select Committee would have been dissolved when Parliament would have been dissolved, and we would now have that dedicated ministry is now a part of the Ministry of Justice. So I'm a little bit disappointed with the traction that was made in the constitutional reform process for the year. I'm a little bit disappointed with that. I had hoped that following the election, we would have seen an increased priority on the matter, but then of course we had a national emergency that would have taken our focus away from it again. So I think my overall feeling for the year as it relates to constitutional reform is disappointment, unfortunately. But for next year, I'm hoping that we can again make it a priority action. I do think that we were quite close to at least being in that position to remove the king, and finally have a local head of state. At least that was that first bill, and we weren't able to even get to see it properly debated. So I'm hoping that will be at the forefront of our legislative agenda for 2026. That's how I feel. I know you might have some more extensive feelings, Mikkel.
I mean, just in terms of practicality, much wasn't expected following the election, because you're talking about the department, going back to the ministry, what was now a ministry by itself, being subsumed into a ministry, rightfully so. And I think, to be fair to Delroy Chuck and his team, that one would need to find its footing in a new parliamentary cycle. So I like to give grace. So I would give the government grace in that respect. But for me, tone setting and bipartisan approach is what I am disappointed in. So the government and the opposition continues to be at loggerheads where this is concerned. And we do take note of Hurricane Melissa. But to my mind, and I said it on this program, I do believe, notwithstanding Mark Golding having that shadow cabinet position himself, I do believe that it is important that the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition meets with haste, because leadership sets the tone in terms of what is agreed upon. Where there is still disagreement, you can still chart a path forward in terms of what you're proposing to the public. The Constitution itself provides for it. So it's okay, for example, if the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition meets and they come and say, country, we still have not come to an agreement as to where we are with the final Court of Appeal. Notwithstanding us not having that consensus, this is what we're proposing to the public. The referendum or public education, a non-binding referendum. And I say non-binding because it's basically like a survey to feel the pulse of the people, to get a sense of where we are as a country on the final Court of Appeal, the reasons we are there, and then you can chart the way forward. I believe that type of meeting between the two party heads is important before you go into the nitty-gritty. But I do believe that post-Christmas, we should be hearing from Justice Minister as to where the more granular details are in terms of moving forward with constitutional reform. And I again, giving grace to the Justice Minister. But by January, I do believe we should have an idea. And I, again, think that the Prime Minister and the opposition leader needs to meet on it.
Thanks for that, Mikkel. Again, as you were talking, and you brought up Hurricane Melissa, and I was thinking about, I don't know if you'll get my thread, but the first thing that came to my head was the occupational safety and health legislation, or lack thereof. Because a hurricane, especially a Category 5 hurricane like this, can be a disabling event. It can be an event that puts you in a position where provisions that would have protected your rights, like those under the Occupational Safety and Health Bill that we have not yet put into force, would have been useful to have, you know. I can't help but hope, as well as we're talking about wants for next year. We usually hear it brought up in the legislative agenda. I sincerely hope that it is something that is on the forefront of our legislators' minds going into next year, considering that we, based on all trends, are up for more heavy natural events.
Earthquakes. Listen, I was so frightened when we had Dr. Moody on the program, listening to, you know, what will come.
Yes.
And so on. Because I can tell you with Hurricane Melissa, I think when I realized how serious it was when Mr. Grant from JPS said, lights will go in that frank way. And I said, mighty God, I need to go to the supermarket and get what I needed.
Yes.
And to be fair, the state was doing what they needed to have done. And as an organization, you know, the team went home, I believe, from the Thursday and so on. But it was not until Mr. Grant said, lights will go. I said, okay, this thing's serious now, because clearly we're going to be expecting much more than what several people anticipated.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I was just gonna say that was another theme of things that we would have discussed this year in terms of, you know, climate action and climate change in itself. You know, access to information in related to climate issues and environmental issues. That was something that was a part of our advocacy for 2025 that will likely continue into 2026.
Yeah, and congratulations to Minister Matthew Samuda on his appointment. It's a good look for Jamaica. And I believe that the appointment, you know, the government has made some commitments following a meeting led by Dr. Theresa Moody with the ministry with responsibility for environment. So some commitments were made in Parliament and at that meeting. And I believe that the appointment of this presidency, you know, puts a little extra onus on the government to ensure that Jamaica is doing what it must. But the last thing from me, Jade, before I turn over to you, my disappointment in terms of legislative movements is the Domestic Violence Act still remains unamended. The Joint Select Committee, notwithstanding that minor amendment that was made, I believe, in 2024 or late 2023, I don't remember the date. But remember, a Joint Select Committee itself was convened. It met just a few times. JFJ, we had called for an update on that Joint Select Committee. No response was provided by the state, and we have not heard anything around it. And I do believe it's important that our minister moves with haste in having that Joint Select Committee reconvened as soon as is possible in 2026, so that we can see a comprehensive review of the Domestic Violence Act. And I just think, quite frankly, it's a matter of respect for these agencies, including JFJ, who spent hours and days putting together a parliamentary submission, that out of respect for the agencies and the individuals who did that on behalf of victims and survivors, that at the very least, a letter should have come from the ministry to indicate to us what the status of the review of the bill is.
Yeah, an important point there, Mikel. I know that there are at least 2 Joint Select Committees whose reports I am still anticipating, having worked on submissions to them, those reviewing the Integrity Commission Act and the Protected Disclosure Act. We have not seen the reports from those committees yet. I don't think they have finished meeting as yet, if I remember correctly. But that's something I would hope to see coming out of 2026 as well. But we have 2 minutes, so we are closing out our final.
I won't sing you a Christmas song, as I'm.
Sing is a generous word that we're using here.
No, I listeners, I'm one of those people. I put the fan in front of my face when I was a teenager, and I sing in it because you sound very well at that time. It's like a natural autotune. So if you do not have the gift, try that. I still do it, by the way, as a means of relaxation. Yeah.
Well, fortunately for our listeners,
weird behavior for you, right? So.
Fortunately for our listeners, there are no fans and no Mikkel in the studio, so you'll be spared this week. We do have a winner for our trivia question. That is Corinne. The trivia question for today was, which legislation governs the circuit court? And that is the Judicature Supreme Court Act. So, Corinne, you can reach out at 2397583. I'd also like to thank those who came and joined us in Sir William Grant Park last week on December 10th for our Justice for All Expo. We had an excellent showing of persons. A lot of people came out and got information. And now that you know that that's somewhere you can come and get information, the next time JFJ is on the road, please make sure you come by, collect some of those printed materials and learn more about your rights for free, and ask those questions that you might have at our booths. But again, thank you all for your support over the past year. My name is Jade Williams.
My name is Mikkel Jackson. Have a great Christmas holiday.
And we'll see you in January.
Join the National Cleanup and Volunteer Drive. Let's restore our communities one street, one home, one heart at a time. Sign up at supportjamaica.gov.jm. The time by the Office of the Prime Minister is
2 p.m.
The police civilian